Okay, let's start the event. I'd like to welcome all of you to the May monthly meeting. It's great to have all of you here. So, the topic that we're going to cover today is peer pressure. And what I would start off with is actually explain what we're doing here in this monthly meeting and in all monthly meetings and the way that we actually approach something like peer pressure. So with lifespan education, when you join, we expect that all of you are students. So you're enrolled in university or in school and you have courses that you do and you try to get your qualifications and you do your studies, you do your exams and all the normal things that students do. And lifespan education doesn't try to replicate that. So we don't create courses for you to get mastery in a particular subject. So what we are trying to do is to enhance your educational experience, what you have at school and what you have at university, with things which are harder to deal with because when institutions like universities and school focus on courses and qualifications, they have to spend a lot of time for you to master those subjects. So there is then less opportunity to do what we can do in lifespan education, which is about dealing with your mindset, dealing with your stress, dealing with all the broader skills and knowledge and experiences that are about creativity and communication, about your thinking, about collaboration, about how you actually deal with day-to-day things, how you do long-term planning. And so all of those broader things that is not easy to convey through a course. So that's why we have things like the monthly meeting. So when we deal with something like peer pressure, what we're trying to do is to give you an experience that when you come together and meet, like all of you are doing now with me and Rose and Nasir, and then you get to think about what is covered here. You listen to what other students say. You share what you're doing, and then you see how people respond to your sharing. All those are actually very significant experiences that is actually very hard to get, very hard to create, and very hard to find. So that's what we try to do here. So examples, if we talk about it, we share it, we see how other people respond, then we think about how other people are responding, then we respond to them. What this does is a lot of things. So it normalizes your experiences. So if you went through it alone, then you're going to actually feel a lot more stressful. But if you see that other people are actually dealing with it, and then they do it in different ways or similar ways to you, that has significant impact on us. So it increases your self-awareness. This is how I think about it. And then when you say it, then you can see yourself saying it, and then you are aware of how you deal with things. So it helps you better understand your reactions, your emotions, your motivations. And all of those, the part of the reasons you do that is to reduce stress and to reduce the anxiety that comes with experiencing those things. It helps you build your confidence. So by you trying out different ways that you express it, by telling other people about how you deal with something, you can hear yourself speak, but you also hear other people deal with those. So that builds your confidence by exploring what is actually happening to you. Then another important thing is that you impact other people by you sharing and listening to other people sharing. You have an impact. You empower others. So that influences other people, but also makes you feel good by having that influence. So now all of these things are what we come together in the student forum, why we have group chats, why we have monthly meetings to deal with these things. So what you get out of this though is what you put in. So sharing doesn't happen if you just sit back and be silent and you just watch other people. So although we'll look at a few videos in today's events, the sitting back and just watching have some impact, but it's very minimal. So the impact of you being in lifespan education, student forum, and most of the programs and the experiences we provide for you, if you don't engage and move forward to do something with it, then you're going to get very little. So your mindset doesn't change, your experiences don't change, your behavior don't change. So we expect that students get from it what you put in. Okay. But having said that, so let's just move forward. If anybody has any questions during this time, then feel free to share it, and then we can talk about it, and we'll see how everybody else's responses. Okay, so now let's look at some videos. I think we'll talk about those things as we look through some of these key videos that are all about peer pressure. So let me first just share my screen. Okay. So now let's look through this. So we have a few videos prepared that you can have a look at.
What's up, guys? Justin here, and I want to start today by telling you a story of a time when I used to play basketball. Okay, so it was one day we were waiting for practice to start, and my one teammate looks at my other teammate and he goes, "Did you know that we can break into that concession stand?" Before you know it, that concession stand garage door is propped open, and one of my teammates dove in head first and just started throwing snacks everywhere. Everyone on my team was eating snacks, they were enjoying it. You would have thought it was Thanksgiving. And I remember feeling so left out and so different because I chose not to eat the snacks in that moment. And in that moment, I felt the pressure from my teammates, the expectation of like, just eat it like it's free food. Why aren't you eating this snack right now?
So that was a scenario by a creator that's on YouTube about peer pressure. All right. So the scenario is that what that person was saying is that he was in a basketball team. So in a basketball team, then from the way he talks is that the team's very close. So now some of the other members, as they were walking past, decided to raid a place, with snacks, and he wasn't actually comfortable doing that. And so as they were doing it, he decided that he actually won't do it. And then he was talking about the pressure that comes from that. So now, when you encounter those situations, so we encounter those actually quite often, even for me as an adult, I encountered it, and I know that when I was a student, and that it happens all the time that you're in a group, and then certain things that you like to do with your group, but then certain things you don't. So that's the nature of peer pressure. So in these cases, what the video is bringing up is to prompt you to think what is it about the pressure that comes from group? How do you feel when you actually belong in a group? What does the group give you, and then what do you give to them that actually forms your connection to the group? So as a result of that connection, then there are certain things that they would do, some things that you be comfortable with, some things you don't. So what are those, and how do you actually deal with them when they do things that you're not comfortable with? All right. So some important things then for you to think about is that for us to be in a group, to belong together, there has some concessions that you make to promote that sense of belonging. You have to do things that other people are doing, because if you never do something with each other, then you don't actually have a group and you don't have any connections. So the question then is what type of things that you do, and then what falls outside of it, and then what do you do when things actually fall outside of it? Another important thing to think about is that a lot of times when you're dealing with peer pressure, at the time when certain things happen, sometimes you make the right decision, sometimes you don't. But if something like that happens and then you go along with the crowd and then later on you decide otherwise, you realize that you shouldn't have done that, then how do you actually deal with that? That is actually a more important thing than the moment to response, because that trains you on how to deal with more and more complicated situation. And also without the adrenaline rush of something like shown in this example where they're raiding a shop, and then probably a lot of people are very excited, you get snacks and then you're eating snacks. The probably decision making is not optimal, but if you have but you're able to review it later and you have built up a routine and you built up a relationship where you can actually talk about those things and bring it up during times when things are calm, then you get a chance to improve not only yourself, but actually how the group actually works. So think about that, and let's share then what you see in that video and how you feel about it. What do you think about what this person did in the video, and how does that apply to you? What kind of groups do you belong to? What kind of pressure do you feel? And then how do you actually deal with situations that's similar to what this video has? Okay, now let's move to the next video. I'll share my screen again.
How do you deal with peer pressure? Most of the time I cave in.
I don't really let peer pressure affect me. I'm a really independent person and I do what I want always.
I wouldn't say I really deal with it. Say I just kind of accept. I usually just like fall into it. I'll cave in.
I mean, peer pressure is definitely a thing when you first enter college, but I think once you get older and you kind of make those like stronger friendships, I think it's not as big of a thing that I deal with. What I'll usually do is I'll just like think about it. I'll tell people like, oh yeah, let me think about it. I'll get back to you on it. So then I'll go home and be like, I'm not doing that. And I'll just be like, something came up.
Okay, now let's talk about this one. So in this one is actually interview on students that's at a university campus, and they talk about a few different responses that people have. And what you see is that people describe that either they usually just cave in, or they don't actually let people affect them, so it doesn't really matter to them. And so this is actually quite a common thing for us when we think about peer pressure, is that we either label ourselves as somebody who just caves in or somebody that doesn't let that peer pressure affect them. But what I prompt you to think about is that those are actually quite extreme. The characterization of how you deal with pressure. So most people don't cave in all the time, and most people don't just act independently all the time. We usually are somewhere in the middle. So sometimes we cave in, and then sometimes we think for ourselves. And it's important to recognize this nuance that our responses and our behavior are usually just somewhere in between. It's usually moderated. It's usually somewhere in between those extremes. Why it's important to recognize that is that because if you take the extreme, so say you take the example that I always think independently, what other people say doesn't affect me, then you don't get a chance to recognize that sometimes we do fall, we do respond to pressures from our peers. So if we just sit and say that nothing ever affects us, first of all, it's not true. And second of all, you don't get a chance to recognize and to respond to sometimes when the peer pressure does happen. And then you're able to confront it yourself, inside of yourself, and also then confront it with other people. The same way that if you label yourself as somebody who caves in all the time, then you're at such an extreme in terms of the way you think that is very, there wouldn't be much motivation for you to change because you think you're so far that you can't think for yourself, that you don't give yourself credit for the times that when you do make your own decisions, and also be able to talk to other people about those times when you don't want to, when you are thinking for yourself. So the response for if we label ourselves as somebody who always caves in is that the natural things that we usually give up because and we just avoid situations where we face peer pressure, which actually makes things worse. That's the thing with most life responses is that the moment you label yourself in the extreme, then you make things worse because you push yourself further and further in the extreme. So these are called self-fulfilling prophecies. So for this video, I'd like you to think about that usually your behavior and the way you think and the way you respond are nuanced. They're somewhere in the middle, and it's healthy to be in that nuanced way because usually our improvement, we don't jump from this one to this one or this one to the middle straight away. It's usually graduated. So recognizing that we're somewhere along in this range allows us to say, well, the next thing that we want to improve on, the things that we talk to other people about, things that we work on for ourselves, is just that little step to move forward. Most improvements, the hard improvements, are by little steps. Okay, so again, think about yourself. How do you describe yourself in terms of your response to peer pressure? It'll tell you a lot about the way you view yourself, and also then helps you work out what is the better way of thinking about it, and the more helpful way of thinking about it. And then also, as we share, you see how other people deal with that situation, how they describe themselves, and you're able then to help others with the way that they think, right? So I hope that you take the chance to actually share. All right. Okay. Now let's look at the third video. Let's see here. This video has some Indian language, but most of it is in English. So I'm just going to make use of the English part.
பக்கத்து வீட்டு பையன் வந்து engineering படிக்க போயிருக்கான், so அதனால நம்ம பையனும் engineering படிக்க போகணும். As parents, this is how we do, right? We are comparing others' kids to our kids, putting the pressure on them to excel like the other kid. That is peer pressure. As parents, what we do is, as grown-up adults, oh, my neighbor has this car. I think I should go and get this car. We do that. But the critical question is, why does peer pressure happen? Peer pressure happens because of comparison. He has an iPhone, nanu or iPhone recognition. If I have this particular thing, an iPhone, then people are going to recognize you. All right, you stand out. So peer pressure happens because of recognition. Teachers putting peer pressure on students. In your class setting, a teacher is comparing one student to another student. Automatically, you put them on peer pressure, and it gives an irreparable damage to their minds. It alters the way of thinking.
Okay, so this one isn't about students talking about students and students talking about the student experience. It's actually about a parent and a teacher talking about the pressure that adults, the parents or the teachers can apply to their children or to students. So now all of us belong in families and we feel the pressure of our families. As I said before, that we don't want to label ourselves in the extremes, that everybody experiences these pressures in some way, one way or the other. So the question is that how do we actually deal with it? So the situation is that because of how families are and how parents are, that there will be some even very mild pressure that's being applied just by expectations of what the family has. And some of it is quite strong, some of it is quite weak, and you feel it in different ways. What I want you to think about is the same thing as what I've spoken about in the first two videos. Now, how do you belong in this group? How do you belong in the family? How do you belong in the classroom? What identity? How do you view yourself being a part of it? You know what? So, because it's important for you to think about that, because if you respond in very extreme ways, so one extreme way is that I'll just go along with whatever the parents say or whatever the teacher says, then you never get to grow and you never get to experience the chance of finding your own direction. Now, if the other extreme is that I don't like that pressure, I'm just going to reject it, and then I won't do anything that they say, I'll just be grumpy, sit in my corner, that's more than anything else is detrimental to yourself because then, again, you don't get a chance to grow. So the question is that somewhere in the middle is that what pressure are we feeling? How do we communicate it? And how do we bring people along for the way that we are growing? So these are not easy things, which is why you have forums like Lifespan Education where you can actually try out. You can talk about your stress and then see how other people respond, and then work out what is actually appropriate for you to respond at a very particular time. So that's what I want you to think about. That not only are peer pressure applied, not only is pressure applied from peers, pressure that you get from other people, like parents and teachers, fall in the same category and you have to deal with them the same way. So again, I believe you get a lot out of it. If you think about your situation, share it, and then talk through what might be happening to you, and then with the focus on long-term growth. What we speak about today, we might not have a resolution, but being able to talk about it initially is already a useful thing. And then conversing and having interaction with other students actually help everybody actually move forward in something like this. So think about that. Okay, let's look at one of the comments that's come through in the chat. So this, what it says is, I completely isolate myself from my peers so that I can be comfortable with expressing my authenticity. It really helping me so far, but I don't know. I can be self-sabotaging behavior and not sure what can be done about it. Of course, it's so fulfilling, but I'm keeping myself from creating connections with emotional detachment. Right, so I want to thank you for sharing. I think that's a really good comment and something that we see a lot and happens to all of us in one degree or another. So the tension is between wanting to connect versus being authentic so that you can be yourself. Because when you connect with other people, there's some adjustments in order for that connection to happen. So my advice that from my experience with people and the students is that navigating the balance between them, and it's not even a compromise. You can actually be fully authentic and also fully connected if you explore ways in order to do it. But it doesn't come straight away. And certainly, if you're very young and you're only starting out in terms of your life, in terms of finding who you are, with who is your authentic self, and then finding how you connect to other people, it may take some time to build. But don't give up on either of them, being authentic and also being connected. Now, on the surface, it looks like it contradicts itself because when you connect, you have to compromise. But when you're authentic, then you're being yourself as much as possible. But I want you to think about is that our authenticity, who we are, is very much defined by our connections. So if you just stand in an empty room and then you talk about who you are, that has no value because the whole point of us being authentic, being ourselves, is to be able to express and to be comfortably to interact with the world around us. So the two are similar. So that's why when we talk about identity, we talk about what are you What's your identity as a son, or what is your identity as a brother or sister? What's your identity as a student? All of those is in relation to other people, right? So you can find that. So the thing that, what you said, the fact that you recognize that there is a tension is already very good. The fact that you're coming here and sharing it. So it's not that you, as you said that I completely isolate myself from your peers, because you're not. You're here and you're sharing. So that by itself has some value. And if you keep doing it, then you have a chance to discover that with your peers and also with yourself. So those are things I have to say, and other people to actually comment on this thing of this tension between wanting to be authentic and also wanting to connect. And then by sharing, we can work out what may be useful for us, and different people will get different things from a sharing and a conversation like that. Okay, we also have another question, another comment. I am a well all-rounder student when it comes to studies, but I'm not able to grasp my full potential because of peer pressure. How can I regulate these negative feelings that is keeping me from behind bars? Yes, that's a good comment and a very descriptive comment about feeling like you're behind bars because you can't grasp your full potential because of this peer pressure. Right. So the first very obvious answer that I would give to you is that how do you regulate these negative emotions? You do it by sharing. So when you share, it's a lot simpler. A lot of things are a lot simpler being out in front of you than being hidden inside. When you're hidden inside, all you can do is just ruminate, feel stress, and then collapse and emotionally collapse and all of that. But when it's out of you, even if nobody responds, as you can see it and you have actually expressed it. Okay. But the key thing about sharing is that we're able to get different types of responses and helps us think about how things are. So all the things I mentioned, which is to recognize that you're not completely useless in terms of handling pressure, but then you're not also a super being that you can resist all pressure, recognizing that you're somewhere in the middle helps with that regulation. Regulation is almost always not about being balanced, and balance sits in not being in the extreme. So to try and find your full potential, which is a journey. I mean, I'm 56 years old this year, and I haven't found my full potential, but it's a journey. So enjoy the journey. Some days it's up, some days it's down. It's like being on a treasure hunt. If you enjoy the treasure hunt of going up and down, that helps you regulate. Balance is a key component of being able to regulate, especially very negative feelings. So the fact that, when I read this and you say that you recognize that you're a good all-rounder and it comes to study, which means that you're actually doing pretty well, that's already telling me that there is balance there. The words that you use, like a all-rounder, and that you're well-rounded, tells me that you're already recognizing something about yourself that's good. And I would encourage you to explore that further and to enhance that even further. So I hope that being a part of lifespan education and the student forum allows you to explore what your full potential is. So share as much as you can. So we'll end our meeting now. Thank you all for participating. Thank you for sharing today. I hope that all of you keep sharing. We're going to have a highlight reel of today and give us a chance to share with other students who are not able to come today. But I encourage all of you to keep sharing and to think about what I said at the beginning of this meeting, where the purpose of lifespan education, the opportunities and the experiences it provides for you. The more that you engage, the more that you get out of it. Okay. Thank you. I'll see you in the next meeting.